Hey guys, tonight we're setting out on a journey that's more nerve-wracking than accidentally replying, all to your boss's email. We're exploring life as a working woman in a 1910s boarding house. Yes, that magical era when your private bedroom came with a side of bedbugs, your dignity was subject to nightly curfews, and the only thing more dangerous than running late was showing your ankle. If you've ever found yourself longing for simpler times, back when rent was cheap and avocado toast was just a glimmer in a grocer's eye, tonight's story will snap you right back to reality. But before we drift off any further, let me ask you a small favour. If you're enjoying these slightly bizarre bedtime journeys through history, consider liking the video and subscribing, but only if you truly want to. No pressure from the boarding house matron, I promise. And thank you for suggesting this topic. I love when these stories come straight from you. It makes this little corner of the internet feel more like a late-night conversation than a lecture. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time you've officially decided to surrender to sleep. I have a feeling at least half of you are using me as a perfectly reasonable excuse to avoid folding laundry. Honestly, I support it. Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for that soothing white noise, get comfortable, and, for extra safety, hide your ankles under the covers, house matron's orders. Let's pause and really think about this. Have you ever wondered how it feels to live in a world where a missed curfew means public shaming? Where hot water is a rumour, not a utility? Where no gentleman callers is not just a policy, it's a constitutional amendment? Did women in 1910 really need permission to own a goldfish? Could you survive eating Sunday hash? Or would you flee for the nearest vending machine? Would you last even a week wearing petticoats? Or would you start a revolution over laundry duty? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1912. You're a working woman with exactly 3 blouses to your name, living in a boarding house run by a landlady who can hear dust settle and smell sin from 2 blocks away. Good luck. Your alarm clock isn't a gentle phone buzz, it's a shrill bell hammered at 6 a.m. by Mrs. Featherstone, the landlady who takes pleasure in waking up a house full of groggy stenographers. The sheets are stiff, the room's freezing, and your bedmate might be a mouse named Harold. Let's talk about mornings in the 1910s boarding house. You'd think the hardest part would be dragging yourself out from under the mountain of woolen blankets, but no, it's the fact that as soon as your eyelids flicker, that bell rings out like a fire alarm for the criminally innocent. You flinch awake, pulse racing, half expecting to be called for a military draft, only to realise it's just time for another glamorous day at the typing pool. The first challenge is the temperature. Forget about thermostats, heated floors, or that fancy electric blanket you complained was a bit too warm last night. In your room, the air is so cold your breath fogs and your nose develops its own microclimate. Your only defence: wearing yesterday's stockings to bed and cocooning yourself in every scrap of fabric you own. Still, there's always that one toe that manages to poke out from the blanket and immediately regrets its life choices. The beds in a 1910s boarding house are, to be charitable, a suggestion of comfort. The mattress is little more than a burlap sack stuffed with whatever the landlord found lying around. Hay, old newspapers, possibly a family of hedgehogs. If you're lucky, you wake up with only a mild backache. If not, you may discover a mysterious lump under your pillow, or, more likely, the aforementioned Harold, who seems to pay no rent but expects visitation rights. Now comes the symphony of roommates and neighbours in various states of misery. Imagine a chorus of coughs, sneezes and whispered complaints, punctuated by the thud of someone's shoes hitting the floorboards. Someone always groans, just 5 more minutes, only to be rebuked by the ever-watchful Mrs. Featherstone, who hovers in the hallway with the energy of a prison warden and the sense of humour of a damp sponge. If you thought mornings were for reflection or gentle meditation, think again. You have exactly 6 minutes to find your slippers, locate your brush, and make a desperate dash for the bathroom, because in this house, bathroom access is a blood sport. There are 8 women on your floor, 2 functional sinks, and 1 tub. The law of the land is simple: first come, first served, and woe to anyone who lingers too long or leaves their toothbrush out of alignment. Once in the washroom, you are greeted by the invigorating embrace of cold water. Hot water is not guaranteed, not at 6 a.m, not ever. You splash icy water on your face with the sort of determination most people reserve for running marathons or escaping burning buildings. This is not a refreshing spa moment. It's a jolt to the soul, a daily reminder that comfort is a privilege best left to people with private bathrooms and stock portfolios. Now comes the wardrobe panic. Boarding house rules dictate you must look presentable at all times, which means buttoning every button, pinning every stray lock of hair, and making sure your hem is exactly regulation length. You attempt to perform this ritual in the dim light, shivering, elbows knocking into your equally freezing roommate, both of you negotiating the delicate ballet of space and modesty. By the time you're dressed and ready, the bell rings again, breakfast is served, and your day has officially begun. You shuffle downstairs, joining the slow-moving river of similarly traumatized women, each of you clutching your coats and composure as if your lives depend on it. And in a way, they do. Because in the world of the 1910s boarding house, survival isn't just about making it through another day at work. It starts right here, every morning, with a bell, a shiver, and the steely resolve to face another round with Mrs. Featherstone, Harold the Mouse, and the ever-present cold. Welcome to the wake-up call. You'll never hit snooze the same way again. Before breakfast, you face your first trial, squeezing yourself into 5 layers of starched cotton and wool, making sure no undergarment peeks out. God help you if a petticoat string snaps. Modesty is the real breakfast of champions. Let's set the scene. It's barely light out, and already your morning resembles an Olympic event, with yourself as the lone competitor in the speed dressing with one hand while shivering category. The boarding house may be run like a penitentiary, but the true discipline is imposed by society, your employer, and, most terrifying of all, Mrs. Featherstone's eagle-eyed inspections. You're not just getting dressed, you're donning armour for the endless micro-battles of 1910s womanhood. First comes the underlayer, a camisole and long drawers, both starched to within an inch of their afterlife. These are not delicate, lacy things. They're sturdy enough to repel moths, hungry mice, and possibly light artillery. Over that goes the corset, which, despite what costume dramas would have you believe, is about as comfortable as being hugged by a very determined python. You tug the laces tight, hoping for a fashionable silhouette, but mostly aiming to keep your internal organs from drifting. Next, stockings. Wool in winter, cotton in summer, both held up by garters that take a degree in mechanical engineering to fasten. Getting the seams straight is a matter of pride, but also survival. A crooked seam means snickering in the typing pool, and an arched eyebrow from your supervisor. 2 things that haunt your dreams. Then it's time for the main event, your dress. You own, at most, 2 or 3 work dresses, all in sober shades, navy, taupe, brown, the exact colours of existential dread. Each one is tailored within the strictest boundaries of decency. Sleeves below the elbow, necklines high enough to give you altitude sickness, and hems that hover somewhere around your calves. Even in August, your knees haven't seen sunlight since Grover Cleveland was president. Layered over your dress is a petticoat or 2 if you're showing off, followed by a stiffly pressed shirtwaist. The buttons are tiny, stubborn, and engineered by people who clearly never had cold fingers. There's always one you just can't fasten, so you spend 5 minutes cursing under your breath and considering whether safety pins count as a moral failing. A belt cinches the whole ensemble together, not for fashion, but to remind you that breathing deeply is a luxury for another century. Add a cardigan or a tailored jacket for warmth, and you begin to understand why fainting was such a popular pastime. You're sweating and shivering at the same time, a uniquely 1912 sensation known as layering-induced despair. Accessories must be chosen with military precision. A brooch, discreet and not too shiny, a hair comb or ribbon colour-coordinated with the single-minded seriousness of a naval fleet. Shoes are sturdy and practical because heaven forbid you hobble into work with an exposed instep or, worse, an unsanctioned heel. Let's not forget the hat. No woman leaves the house without one, for fear of social collapse or more likely sunstroke from Mrs. Featherstone's glare. You pin it into place with sharp, deadly hairpins, useful later for fending off unwanted attention or opening stubborn mail. The hat, of course, must sit at just the right angle, straight, serious, and a little bit apologetic. As you fumble through the final buttons, you run through the boarding house's silent checklist. Is anything too tight, too loose, too bright, too daring? Does this collar say, trustworthy office worker, or danger to polite society? Will Mrs. Featherstone's eyebrow twitch with approval, or will she hand you the dreaded shawl, a scarlet letter of insufficient modesty? The whole ritual takes at least 20 minutes, longer if your roommate is also competing for mirror space. Privacy is non-existent. Your only hope for a moment alone is to be the first one up, but then you risk freezing to death in your underwear. Choose wisely. Finally, you're ready. You step into the hallway, fabric rustling like leaves in a starched autumn breeze, every inch of you checked, pinned, and tightly contained. The sense of accomplishment is brief, soon to be replaced by the slow horror of realizing you have to do this again every day for the foreseeable future. But you do it, because this is 1912, and being properly dressed isn't just about fashion, it's about safety, employment, and surviving another round in the great boarding house battle royale. Ever lined up for a bathroom with 8 other women before coffee? Welcome to the world of cold taps, strict bath schedules, and exactly 12 minutes to achieve basic hygiene, with Mrs. Featherstone timing every second. In the 1910s boarding house, the bathroom is a rare and contested territory, a small tiled battleground where reputations, friendships, and personal dignity are won and lost. You shuffle to the back of the queue, clutching your battered toiletries, your eyes heavy with sleep, your soul heavy with the knowledge that someone always manages to leave the floor suspiciously damp. The line stretches down the hallway like a parade of anxious ghosts, each woman performing the slow shuffle of anticipation, dread, and the desperate hope that someone ahead might suddenly give up and retreat. Privacy in this scenario is a fantasy, something you read about in novels like flying cars or ice cubes that never melt. The bathroom door offers as much security as a beaded curtain in a tornado. Every cough, splash, and panicked gasp is public knowledge. Your only protection is the gentle art of pretending not to hear anything, while quietly hoping no one is eavesdropping on you. The bathroom itself is both utilitarian and unforgiving. There are 2 sinks, each equipped with a single stubborn tap that wavers between freezing and maybe just above hypothermia. If you're hoping for hot water, you'd better have prayed the night before, because whatever ration there was got used up at 5:45 a.m. by the house's lone morning person, a mythic figure known only by the faint scent of lavender soap and the smug silence of someone who's already washed and dressed. The centerpiece of this spa experience is the clawfoot tub, chipped and slightly alarming, which is reserved for bath nights only. These are scheduled with the precision of military maneuvers and come around with the frequency of lunar eclipses. Bathing, in 1912, is a formal occasion. You book your slot on the choreboard, then spend the entire day worrying about whether your name will still be there when the time comes. If you miss your window, say by collapsing from exhaustion or daring to take an extra shift at work, your only recourse is a sponge bath with a washcloth and a bad attitude. Showers, you ask. Please. The only thing showering in this house is the peeling paint from the ceiling every time someone tries to run both taps at once. When your moment finally arrives, the pressure is on. You step inside the gleaming scrutiny of Mrs. Featherstone, who checks her wristwatch with the solemnity of a referee at the world's slowest sporting event. You have exactly 12 minutes. This is not hygiene. This is performance art. You turn on the tap, wait a solid 30 seconds for any temperature change, then grit your teeth and splash your face, neck, and, if you're lucky, your armpits. Hair washing is a luxury best saved for Sundays or national holidays. Meanwhile, your fellow boarders hover just outside the door, sighing, shuffling, and gently knocking every 3 minutes to remind you that time is quite literally running out. Nothing humbles a person like trying to brush their teeth, wash their face, and arrange their hair while under siege by the world's most impatient Greek chorus. Toothpaste is rationed, soap is sacred, and the towel hooks are a source of low-level passive-aggressive warfare. As for the mirror, it's a foggy, contested zone, forever smudged by nervous hands and emergency hairpins. You have precisely 30 seconds of mirror time before you're politely elbowed aside by the next in line, whose hair is somehow already perfect and who resents you for existing. When you emerge, victorious but slightly damp, you do the walk of shame down the hall, towel in hand, avoiding eye contact with the 8 other women still waiting. You're cleaner than you were, but you've also just aged 10 years. Welcome to the boarding house bathroom, a daily exercise in humility, speed and survival. If you manage to exit with your dignity and both socks, you've already won. Breakfast isn't a meal, it's an endurance test featuring lumpy porridge, communal jam, and the constant threat of being assigned extra chores for talking too loudly. The table conversation is limited to polite coughs and silent judgments. By the time you shuffle into the breakfast room, your nerves are already frayed by the battle of the bathroom and the cold slap of early morning. The communal table stretches the length of the parlour, covered in a starched white cloth that's seen better centuries and exactly 3 mismatched jars of jam. Chairs scrape the floor in a discordant symphony as 12 women manoeuvre for the best seats, which, much like the best prospects in life, are located strategically far from the kitchen door and the direct line of Mrs. Featherstone's gaze. At the heart of the table, oatmeal. Not the creamy, slow-cooked, Instagram-worthy kind, but its grim cousin, lumpy, grey, and stubbornly adhesive, possessing a texture that hovers somewhere between school paste and spackle. You ladle a portion into your chipped bowl, watching it slump under its own weight. It is, as always, inexplicably cold. Someone mutters that last night's leftovers are probably hiding underneath, plotting their escape. Butter is doled out in portions so thin you could read your daily schedule through them. If you want jam, you'll need to reach across 3 people and risk an accidental elbow to the ribs. There is exactly 1 knife per table, which means you're either waiting or becoming adept at spreading preserves with the back of your spoon. As for the bread, it's dense enough to be considered a self-defense weapon, useful given the climate of silent competition. There's an unspoken code at breakfast. Eat quickly, avoid eye contact, and whatever you do, don't draw attention. It's not just Mrs. Featherstone you have to worry about. The other boarders are just as vigilant, their silence a constant humming tension. If you so much as whisper to the person next to you, a dozen pairs of eyes lock on with laser precision. That's how rumours start. A single, ill-timed giggle, and suddenly you're the talkative one, and worse, the next in line for extra dusting duty. For those brave enough to try conversation, there's always the risk of being shushed by the senior resident, Miss Plimpton, who sees herself as the unofficial guardian of order. Her special talent, hearing whispered jokes at 20 paces and reporting them straight to the landlady, along with a running tally of who took more than their fair share of bread. Breakfast isn't just about food, it's about ritual, routine, and the unending struggle for survival. Your goal is simple: consume enough calories to make it through a morning of typing, standing, or factory work, all while remaining invisible. If you finish too quickly, you look greedy. If you linger, you look lazy. If you spill anything, tea, milk, jam, or, God forbid, oatmeal, you might as well change your name and flee the country. A single misstep, a dropped spoon, a cough at the wrong moment, a stifled laugh at someone's lopsided bun can land you on Mrs. Featherstone's blacklist. Her punishments are legendary and creative: extra chores, stern lectures, or, worst of all, being forced to present a reflection on etiquette in front of the group. Nothing sours your morning like public humiliation over porridge. But there are bright spots. Sometimes, if the sun is streaming in and everyone's too tired to care, there's a sense of camaraderie, a shared glance over the oatmeal, an almost smile, a brief truce in the silent Cold War. Maybe someone sneaks you an extra slice of bread, or slides you the last smear of jam when no one's looking. It's not friendship exactly, but it's a start. And so you eat, in silence and with side-eye, fortified by carbs and caution. Breakfast in the boarding house is a social minefield, but if you make it through without incident, you've already conquered the first challenge of the day. Welcome to Oatmeal Hour. Chew quietly, keep your head down, And don't forget to save a little jam for tomorrow. Forget spontaneous late-night adventures. The boarding house curfew slams down at 10 p.m. sharp. Anyone caught sneaking in late faces interrogation, eternal suspicion, and possibly the dreaded character reference letter sent to your employer. The boarding house curfew isn't just a rule, it's the law of the land, enforced with the iron will of Mrs. Featherstone, who has the uncanny ability to sense the sound of a shoe brushing the doormat at 10:01. While the rest of the city might be buzzing with jazz and trolley cars, inside these walls, the atmosphere shifts the moment the clock chimes a single fateful note. Windows are shut, the parlour lights flicker off, and the hallway is patrolled by the shadowy silhouette of a landlady who could double as a night watchman at Alcatraz. The day's hustle comes to a grinding halt at curfew. No more strolls by the river, no impromptu ice cream at the corner drugstore, and certainly no romantic rendezvous on a park bench beneath the stars. 10 o'clock is a hard stop. No exceptions, no excuses, and absolutely no extensions. But there was a trolley delay, you plead. Mrs. Featherstone simply taps her clipboard and records your tardiness in her ledgers of eternal judgment. Those last 15 minutes before curfew become a frantic, adrenaline-fueled obstacle course. You're weaving through crowds, clutching your hat, dodging slow-moving passers-by like a competitive sport. Every second counts. You run the last block, heart pounding, as the street lamps flicker on and your boots echo on the cobblestones. At the door, you fumble with the lock, praying you won't drop your keys and set off the hounds of social ruin. Inside, you're met not with relief, but with Mrs. Featherstone, arms crossed, eyebrow arched, watch in hand. You're in, but you're on notice. For those unfortunate enough to miss the deadline, the repercussions are severe. Mrs. Featherstone doesn't yell, she doesn't need to, she simply sits you down in the front parlour, in a chair reserved for the condemned, and begins her inquisition. Was it worth it? She asks, as if you've just returned from a life of crime. You offer your defence, trolley breakdown, work overtime, a simple misreading of the town clock, but her silence is damning. She writes your name in the infamous curfew ledger, a book rumoured to be mailed straight to St. Peter should you ever try to enter heaven late. Then comes the whispered gossip. News of your indiscretion spreads through the boarding house like wildfire. She was late last night, someone murmurs over toast. Must be a rebel, or worse, a woman with secrets. The other boarders eye you with a mix of awe and suspicion. The boarding house thrives on rumour, and nothing is juicier than a good old-fashioned rule-breaker. You become both legend and warning, proof that even the most upstanding woman can be felled by the tyranny of the clock. But the greatest fear isn't Mrs. Featherstone, or even the shame of being the late one. No, the greatest fear is the threat of the character reference. A letter sent to your employer detailing your flagrant disregard for punctuality, and the sacred trust of communal living. In 1912, your reputation is your currency, and one poorly timed night out can cost you your job, your income, and your hard-won independence. Inside your room, after the curfew drama has faded, you lie in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle into sleep. The city hums beyond the window, a world you're not quite allowed to join, not after 10. You think of all the things happening out there. Dances, music, laughter, and the tantalising freedom of people who don't have to answer to a landlady with a strict bedtime. You wonder if you'll ever be one of them. Yet every woman in the house plays the curfew game. Some accept it, some resent it. Some, on rare daring nights, attempt a stealthy return, tiptoeing up the stairs, breath held, shoes in hand. But Mrs. Featherstone always knows. The walls, it seems, have ears. So you tuck in, dreams tinged with what-ifs and quiet rebellion. Tomorrow the struggle begins anew. For now, the clock rules. 10 o'clock isn't just the end of the day, it's a boundary, a lesson, and a reminder that in the boarding house, freedom is always just out of reach, waiting patiently on the other side of curfew. Romance in a boarding house is an Olympic sport. You dodge prying eyes, pass secret notes, and pray no one catches you walking arm in arm with a man, unless you want your reputation obliterated over tea. The rules are simple, brutal, and written in ink darker than a January night. Gentlemen are not permitted above the first floor, not even if they're your brother, your boss, or the world's most respected botanist. The front parlour is as far as any man gets, and only then if you've submitted a written request, 3 days in advance, countersigned by Mrs. Featherstone and, for good measure, probably by Queen Mary herself. No exceptions. Of course, love does not obey landladies, clipboards, or the sacred parlour furniture. So you become a master of subterfuge. Letters are composed in the dead of night, with a lookout posted at the door. Every note, every pressed flower, every poem penned in trembling pencil must be hidden away from the prying hands of Mrs. Featherstone, who it is rumoured once found a billet doux tucked in a biscuit tin and still brings it up during inspections a decade later. Walks in the park are carefully orchestrated with elaborate cover stories involving errands, cousins, and urgent fresh air. If you're feeling daring, you might agree to meet your suitor at the Sunday church picnic, sandwiched between the vicar and a flock of gossip-hungry spinsters. Even then, you keep your conversation as bland as a water biscuit, and your hands tightly clasped behind your back, lest someone spot even the suggestion of courtship. The other boarders watch everything. Romance is as much a group project as a personal adventure. Your friends will run interference, loitering in doorways to warn you if Mrs. Featherstone is approaching, or the neighbourhood busybody is doing her rounds. At the same time, there's always the risk of betrayal. One poorly chosen confidant and your secret is on the breakfast table, sandwiched between critiques of the oatmeal and complaints about laundry schedules. Should you receive a gift, a book, a ribbon, heaven help you, a single wilted rose, you must dispose of the evidence immediately. Nothing rouses suspicion like happiness, and nothing damns you like a scented envelope. You become a genius at misdirection. Letters are passed through trusted intermediaries, sometimes children who will do anything for a penny, sometimes the grocer's delivery boy, who, let's be honest, is in it for the gossip. There are stories of bouquets hidden inside hollow loaves of bread, of love notes slipped into the pages of library books, of clandestine signals flashed from bedroom windows using nothing more than a hand mirror and the midday sun. Despite all precautions, sometimes love's cover is blown. Maybe you're caught lingering by the gate. Maybe Mrs. Featherstone intercepts a suspiciously flowery telephone message. The consequences are swift and merciless. Your name is mentioned at tea, your intentions are analysed, your character dissected by a committee of women who haven't seen a real scandal since the great corset debate of 1907. One wrong move and you're that girl, the one with loose morals, dangerous ideas, and a future of whispered warnings and side-eye at every church social. Yet, the urge to love, to be loved, is stubbornly human. Couples persevere, risking everything for a brief touch of hands or a secret walk under the moonlight. Sometimes a romance survives, blossoming into an engagement, then, after a carefully chaperoned courtship, a wedding. And sometimes, more often, the affair fades, starved by distance, fear, and the constant pressure of communal surveillance. In the end, romance in the boarding house isn't about bouquets or candlelit dinners. It's about courage. It's about knowing the price of a secret smile and daring to pay it anyway. You lie awake at night replaying whispered conversations, heart fluttering with the thrill and terror of loving in the shadows, and in the morning you put on your most innocent face and join the other women for oatmeal, pretending you're thinking about nothing at all. Because in this house, even love has a curfew. Laundry is a full-contact sport. Each woman gets one morning a week, and woe to anyone who leaves a stray stocking in the tub. Clotheslines crisscross the courtyard like tripwires, and the fight for hot water is absolutely cutthroat. Let's talk about the emotional roller coaster that is laundry day in a 1910s boarding house. You'd think scrubbing a few blouses would be simple, but here it's a battlefield. A carefully orchestrated ballet of buckets, elbow grease, and barely suppressed resentment. The house schedule is posted in the hallway. A handwritten grid with names, times, and the subtle warning that any deviation will result in chaos, carnage, or, worse, a lecture from Mrs. Featherstone about the decline of feminine discipline. Your slot is sacred. Thursday morning, 7:10 to 9 a.m. Miss it and you forfeit your rights to sudsy glory until next week. There's no just popping in for a quick rinse. The laundry room is neutral territory only for those officially on the manifest. But what if you oversleep, or get tied up at work, or heaven forbid catch a cold? You beg, you barter, you plead with a roommate to swap, but there are no free favours in the world of communal washing. Laundry alliances rise and fall like small governments. The room itself is humid, steamy, and filled with the mingled scent of soap, sweat, and simmering rivalry. There's a single ancient copper boiler, which sometimes wheezes out enough warm water for one lucky soul. If you're second in line, you're faced with a tub of water that's somewhere between refreshingly brisk and did I just see ice form? Timing is everything. Some women get up before dawn, circling the door like predators, waiting for their exact moment to pounce. Once inside, the games begin. You haul your basket, a lumpy mass of uniforms, petticoats, stockings, and the occasional mystery item from under your bed, to the tub. Soap is rationed, starch is guarded like family silver, and if you dare use someone else's washing board without asking, you'll be hearing about it over every meal for the rest of the month. You start scrubbing, knuckles white, desperately hoping to beat the clock. It's not just a race against time, it's a race against everyone else's stains and secrets. The real drama starts with the rinse. There's a constant unspoken negotiation over who gets the last pitcher of hot water. Some try charm, others use guilt. A rare few resort to outright bribery. I'll iron your handkerchiefs all next week if you let me have that kettle. But most simply glare, and hope intimidation will make the competition crumble. Once everything is as clean as can reasonably be expected, and let's be honest, that's a low bar, it's time for the clotheslines. The backyard becomes a maze of flapping linens, pinned socks, and shifting shadows. Clotheslines are claimed early, sometimes marked with a ribbon, sometimes with a simple threat. Esne infringement, a petticoat draped over someone else's line, a blouse hung in a prime sunspot, is considered an act of war. Petty sabotage isn't unheard of. A hidden pin here, a mysteriously misplaced stocking there. Accidents, they'll claim, but everyone knows the truth. And then there's the weather. The universe delights in scheduling rain the moment your last shirt is pinned. Women dash outside to rescue laundry from a sudden downpour, wrestling with soggy sheets and trailing suds, the air filled with shrieks and laughter, and sometimes a vocabulary not approved by the ladies' etiquette book. At the end of the ordeal, you gather your clothes, somewhat cleaner, still damp but radiating the unique scent of triumph and lie. The feeling of accomplishment is fleeting, washed away by the knowledge that you'll do it all again in 7 days. Laundry day isn't just about soap and water, it's about survival, strategy, and if you're lucky, just a hint of sabotage. In the boarding house, a clean blouse is a badge of honour, and a missing stocking is an open invitation for gossip. Every Wednesday, Mrs. Featherstone marches into each room with a white glove and the eyes of a hawk, checking for dust, disorder, and any evidence of illicit fun. One forgotten hairpin can mean a week of extra chores. Inspection day dawns with the sort of dread usually reserved for pop quizzes and surprise audits. You wake to the soft thud of footsteps in the hall and the faint, ominous jingling of keys, a sound that signals both opportunity and doom. Before you've even put on your slippers, you can hear the whispers. She's coming. Featherstone is coming. Rumour has it she once detected a crumb under a pillow from 3 rooms away, and it's never quite clear if her glove is for dust or for dramatic effect. Your morning routine is immediately thrown into chaos. Normally you might dawdle over a comb or sneak an extra few minutes in bed. Not on Wednesday. Today, speed is your friend and vigilance your only shield. You and your roommate leap into action, a blur of blankets, hairpins and underbed dust bunnies. Every drawer is yanked open, every sock scrutinised. The collective goal is survival, and that means eradicating every speck of evidence that life happens here. Clutter is the enemy. Books are stacked with geometric precision, stockings folded so sharply you could use them as rulers. Your one allowed photograph, a sepia portrait of a stern-looking aunt, sits perfectly parallel to the dresser's edge. Even Harold, the unofficial pet mouse, gets a stern talking to, and is gently evicted to the hallway until the coast is clear. But the real terror is dust. It lurks on the highest shelves, under the rug, in the cracks of the windowsill. You wipe, you polish, you hope. Some residents have developed elaborate strategies. One girl spritzes rosewater into the air, hoping it'll distract Mrs. Featherstone's nose from the faint aroma of last night's contraband cocoa. Another swears by bribing the housemaid with toffees, but most of you just clean like your reputations depend on it, because they do. The appointed hour strikes. Mrs. Featherstone appears, white glove gleaming, notebook open to a page ominously titled Infractions. She enters each room with the measured tread of a general about to inspect the troops, her gaze laser-sharp and pitiless. She starts at the door, doorknob polished, check, scuff marks on the floor, noted. She glides to the dresser, swiping her gloved finger along every surface, pausing only to make pointed notes in her book. Your heart pounds as she inspects the bed. Sheets must be hospital corner tight, blankets smooth enough to host a royal procession. A single hair on the pillow, a crease in the coverlet, and you're doomed. Then comes the closet inspection. Hangers aligned, blouses sorted by colour, shoes paired and pointed toward the wall in a show of militaristic discipline. Worst of all is her uncanny ability to spot signs of fun. A hidden candy wrapper, a smuggled magazine, even an innocent sketch tucked into a drawer. If it breaks the rules or suggests excessive enjoyment, it is confiscated with a sigh and a warning about the dangers of distraction. If she finds a hairpin on the floor, it's not just an accident. It's a symbol of your descent into chaos and moral decline. Punishment is swift, extra chores, loss of parlour privileges, or, for repeat offenders, a public lecture on womanly standards delivered during dinner. When she finally leaves, the collective sigh of relief ripples down the hall. You flop on your bed, exhausted from the stress of pretending to be a paragon of order. You survived White Glove Wednesday. Barely. The price is a spotless room, and nerves frayed to their last thread. But for another week you've escaped Mrs. Featherstone's blacklist. Of course, tomorrow the dust will return, the clutter will creep back, and Harold will reclaim his territory. But for tonight, you are victorious. You've outwitted the glove, dodged disaster, and if you're very lucky, avoided a week of scrubbing the stairwell. In the boarding house, that's what passes for glory. Dinner is less a meal, more a demonstration of restraint. Bland meatloaf, mushy vegetables, and etiquette rules so strict you could get expelled for using the wrong fork. If you burp, you're basically blacklisted. At precisely 6 p.m, the dinner bell rings, echoing through the boarding house with a mixture of hope and dread. You shuffle into the dining room, shoulders squared, shoes polished, nerves frayed. The long table stretches under the glow of a single buzzing light, set with mismatched cutlery and plates whose best years are behind them. At the head of the table sits Mrs. Featherstone, judge, jury, and etiquette executioner, armed with a napkin and a stare that could wither fresh parsley. The food arrives with little fanfare, a tray of meatloaf, sliced into hunks so uniform you suspect it was measured with a ruler, and vegetables that have surrendered any hope of texture. Peas slump listlessly in a pool of their own green water. Carrots dissolve at the touch of a fork. The only spice on the table is suspicion. Each boarder takes her allotted portion, careful not to appear greedy, for nothing draws Mrs. Featherstone's attention faster than an extra spoonful of potatoes. The rules of dinner are unspoken, but enforced with a zeal worthy of a royal court. Sit up straight, elbows in, chew with a delicacy that would please your ancestors. Cutlery is a minefield. Salad fork, dinner fork, dessert spoon, all aligned just so. Heaven help the soul who mistakes one for the other. Miss Plimpton, keeper of the house's unwritten traditions, perches nearby with eyes sharp as knitting needles, ready to correct even the most minor breach. "That's not how we hold our knife, dear," she murmurs, a note of triumph in her voice. Conversation is limited. The weather is a safe topic, as is mild commentary on the state of the laundry, or how nice it will be when spring finally arrives. Anything more? Gossip? Dreams? A hint of humour? risks derailing the fragile peace and drawing a gentle but pointed rebuke. Laughter is allowed, but only if it's soft, brief and polite. You must never ever laugh with your mouth full. And yet, beneath the civility, a silent battle rages. Every clink of cutlery is a contest. Some boarders eye the breadbasket, mentally calculating if it's their turn for a second slice. Others pass the butter with a subtle flick of the wrist, hoping their neighbour won't notice they took a bit more than the strict ration allows. The tension is palpable, a kind of culinary Cold War, punctuated by the occasional accidental slip, a dropped fork, a too loud cough. Worst of all, the catastrophic faux pas, the dreaded burp. A single breach of manners is enough to brand you for weeks. Boarders recall these incidents with a shudder. The infamous meatloaf incident of 9, when a young typist dared reach across the table for salt and sent a plate spinning into Mrs. Featherstone's lap. Or the great pea scandal, when someone's peas rolled onto the floor, never to be seen again. These tales are told and retold, warnings for newcomers and cautionary tales for the old guard. As dinner winds down, the pudding is served, usually rice, sometimes tapioca, always met with a silent prayer that it will at least be sweet. Dessert is eaten slowly, not for enjoyment, but to draw out the one truly pleasant moment at the table. When the plates are cleared, Mrs. Featherstone gives a final once-over, ensuring no crumbs remain and every napkin is folded to regulation. You rise from the table as one, relieved, exhausted and grateful to have survived another round. In the boarding house, dinner is less about food and more about survival. Each night is a gauntlet of table manners and social minefields. If you emerge unscathed, count yourself among the lucky. If you slip, well, hope you enjoy doing the washing up all week. Once a week, you collect your wages, only to hand most of it right back for rent and laundry fees. For 15 glorious minutes, you feel almost wealthy, until reality, and the boarding house bill, hits. Payday is an event, a tiny fleeting festival in the grey routine of boarding house life. It starts with anticipation, that fluttery sense of possibility as you walk to the office, glancing in shop windows and plotting imaginary purchases. For one bright shining moment, the world is your oyster. Perhaps you'll buy a new handkerchief. Maybe you'll splurge on a magazine or treat yourself to an apple turnover from the bakery, still warm from the oven. The air tingles with the promise of maybe. Wages are distributed at the end of the day by your employer, who counts out coins with the deliberate slowness of someone who's never paid rent in their life. Each pay packet is a small brown envelope, soft with handling and heavy with hope. You cradle it all the way home, fingers pressed tight to the paper, already calculating how to stretch every penny. For a brief wild quarter of an hour you allow yourself to dream. What if you tucked a coin away in your shoe for a rainy day? What if you treated yourself to a lemonade at the corner cafe or a new hair ribbon just because? The mood in the boarding house shifts noticeably on payday evenings. There's a kind of electric optimism in the air. Women giggle in the hallway, someone suggests a walk to the market, and even Mrs. Featherstone softens, slightly, when the sound of coins jingling announces a house full of wage earners. But this is not the time for carelessness. The house rules are clear. All rent must be paid promptly in full and with the correct change. Woe to the boarder who tries to barter a 5-cent EOU for an extra day's grace. You line up in the parlour, clutching your envelope, waiting for your turn at the landlady's desk. Mrs. Featherstone tallies up each amount with her usual blend of suspicion and mathematical precision. If you're a penny short, she notices. If you try to sneak in late, she notices. It's rumoured she can count a stack of coins by sound alone, like a one-woman mint. Then, of course, come the deductions. Rent, naturally. Laundry, which costs more if you've had the nerve to wear actual petticoats. If you've broken a rule, say, by leaving a hairpin on the stairwell or being late for curfew, there's a behavioural adjustment fee, which is exactly as grim as it sounds. By the time your debts are settled, your envelope is as deflated as your spirits. You find yourself staring at a handful of coins and the dawning realization that your 15 minutes of freedom are already up. Still, there are rituals. Some women squirrel away a few coins for secret treats, a bar of chocolate or a ticket to a silent film on Saturday night. Others stash their savings in ingenious hiding places, inside the lining of a hat sewn into a pillow, or even in a hollowed-out book borrowed from the parlour library. The bravest might invest in a postage stamp, writing a letter home to say, "I'm doing just fine," even when the numbers beg to differ. Sometimes, if you've managed a particularly good week, you celebrate with your friends, splitting a lemon tart, browsing the stalls at the Five and Dime, or window shopping on Main Street, pointing out hats you might buy someday. The laughter is real, even if the purchases are imaginary. And then, as quickly as it came, payday's magic dissolves. The money's gone, but the week stretches on, filled with work, chores, and the steady tick of responsibility. You're back to counting pennies for the public tram, planning meals that stretch leftovers, and hoping nothing in your wardrobe rips before next payday. But for those 15 minutes you were rich, bold, and briefly untouchable. In the world of the boarding house, that's a fortune all its own. Your roommate could be an aspiring poet, a chain letter evangelist, or someone who practices clarinet at midnight. Living together means developing diplomatic skills that would put the United Nations to shame. Sharing a room in a 1910s boarding house is less like cohabitation and more like being randomly assigned a scene partner in an ongoing historical comedy, one where everyone's quirks are dialed up to 11. The walls are thin, the floors creak, and privacy is a myth reserved for the very wealthy or the entirely friendless. You learn early on that survival depends on mastering the gentle art of compromise, boundary drawing, and, when all else fails, strategic earplugs. Your roommate's habits become your weather. If she's a morning person, you're up at dawn whether you like it or not, serenaded by the cheerful hum of someone ironing a shirtwaist or reciting affirmations at the mirror. If she's nocturnal, you adapt to the midnight shuffle of slippers and the glow of a lamp as she jots down her brilliant ideas long after curfew. And then, of course, there's the clarinet. You never realised woodwinds could sound so much like a distress signal, but here you are, learning to identify not just flight of the bumblebee, but also attempted flight, crashed bumblebee. Storage becomes a battleground. There are never enough hooks for hats or enough drawers for stockings, so every item is hotly contested territory. The closet is divided with military precision, your shoes to the left, her mysterious shoe collection, the use for which is never revealed, to the right. Heaven forbid your scarf should drift to her side. Border disputes in this room make the Balkan Wars look like a garden party. Then there's the matter of correspondence. If your roommate is the chatty type, expect a barrage of chain letters, pen pal missives, and mysterious parcels that rattle ominously. If she's a poet, she'll leave scraps of verse tucked into your books and mutter about metaphors while you're trying to untangle your hair. Occasionally you wake to find her reading the dictionary for inspiration, or practicing her signature in case she becomes famous overnight. Food storage is its own diplomatic challenge. The communal snack tin, allegedly for emergencies only, becomes a source of tension and elaborate treaty negotiations. Did you eat the last cracker? Did she borrow your best teacup for her morning coffee, only to leave a coffee ring like a taunt? Small offences accumulate and are addressed with increasingly passive-aggressive notes. Some of us enjoy sleeping past dawn, or please refrain from using my soap for mysterious science experiments. But it's not all discord. Sometimes late at night the laughter bubbles up despite yourselves. You share stories about disastrous dates, swap secrets about surviving the inspection, or team up to outwit Mrs. Featherstone's random character checks. When you're both skint at the end of the week, you pool your coins for a single chocolate bar and split it with a solemnity usually reserved for communion. There are whispered conversations by moonlight, silly games played on rainy afternoons, and a certain comfort in knowing someone else is as bewildered by this place as you are. Living with a roommate is a crash course in patience, humility, and the creative use of pillow barriers. You become fluent in the delicate art of negotiation, trading bathroom time, swapping laundry days, and agreeing not to mention each other's more questionable wardrobe choices. You learn how to ignore the clarinet, how to pretend not to notice the chain letters, how to be gracious about the odd poem left tucked under your pillow, and maybe, just maybe, you emerge from the chaos not just as better diplomats, but as true friends, strange, exhausted, and unlikely, but bound together by the unbreakable solidarity of boarding house survival. Because in the great lottery of lunacy, sometimes you both win. Privacy is a myth. Every cough, every letter, every new hat is dissected by a relentless rumour mill that can turn a misplaced hair ribbon into a 3-week scandal. In the boarding house, news travels faster than influenza. The moment you step into the hallway, you're on stage, and the audience, an assembly of sharp-eyed boarders and the omnipresent Mrs. Featherstone, is ready to pounce on every micro-expression. The halls may be narrow, but they carry whispers with the efficiency of a pneumatic tube. A sigh at breakfast becomes, by supper, a story of heartbreak. A yawn in the parlour is translated into a tale of secret nighttime escapades, and heaven help you if you so much as blush while opening a letter. The chain begins innocently enough. Someone wonders aloud, "Did you see the new girl's hat?" The comment bounces down the hall, morphing as it passes from ear to ear. By lunchtime, the hat is rumoured to have been a gift from a mysterious suitor. By dinner time, it's proof of a scandalous engagement to a man from out of town, possibly a poet, possibly a pirate. The truth, of course, is that you bought it on sale, and the only man who's commented is the grocer. But facts rarely survive first contact with the boarding house whisper network. There are unofficial ambassadors of gossip, Miss Plimpton, self-appointed keeper of moral order, and Mabel, whose hobby is collecting stories, red surveillance. They stake out prime listening spots, the bottom of the stairwell, behind a newspaper in the parlour, just outside the bathroom door, pretending to search for a lost earring. Any bit of overheard conversation is fair game, from grocery lists to snippets of workplace grumbling. Correspondence is a risky affair. The Daily Mail call is a public spectacle. Love letters are scrutinised, postmarks analysed for clues. She's got a letter from Boston. Who do we know in Boston? And any envelope bearing floral print is evidence of something untoward. Once, a letter with a smudge of perfume ignited a fortnight's worth of speculation, complete with covert sniff tests and wild theories involving secret admirers and foreign royalty. It's not just the letters. Even your habits are grist for the rumour mill. Who leaves for work suspiciously early? Who returns with a smile on a Tuesday? Who lingers by the parlour window gazing wistfully into the dusk? If you switch from tea to coffee, someone decides you're courting insomnia for romantic reasons. If you skip dinner, you're on a secret diet, or worse, wasting away from unrequited love. There's a theory for everything, and everyone's an amateur detective. Some try to fight back. You can attempt to fly under the radar, neutral hats, neutral moods, neutral everything. But even the absence of scandal is itself suspicious. Why so quiet? What are you hiding? Others, braver or perhaps simply resigned, lean in. They start wild rumours about themselves just to see how far they'll travel. Yes, I do have a secret twin living in Paris. No, you may not borrow my gloves. It's a form of survival, a way to reclaim a scrap of privacy through performance. But for most, the gossip is an exhausting siege. Reputation is everything. Once tarnished, it's nearly impossible to reclaim. One innocent mistake, like lending a handkerchief to the wrong person, or laughing too loud at a joke, and you're branded for weeks, your character dissected with surgical precision over every meal. Friendships rise and fall on the tides of rumour, alliances shift and loyalties are tested. Still, there's a strange camaraderie in it all. The gossip chain binds the house together, for better or worse, a constant current of shared stories, secrets, and occasional solidarity. Late at night, in whispers, you laugh about the absurdity of it. You share your own rumours, swap confessions, and hope, in your heart, that tomorrow someone else's hat will steal the spotlight. Because in the world of boarding house survival, you're never alone. But you're never entirely safe from the whisper network either. Guard your ribbons, check your letters twice, and remember, the walls not only have ears, they have opinions. Seconds are strictly forbidden unless authorised by the house matron. Getting caught pilfering an extra roll is treated as grand larceny. Hunger builds character, or at least that's what they say. There's no hunger quite like the hunger that settles in after a boarding house dinner. The first plate is always modest, a scoop of potatoes, a slice of meatloaf, if it's Thursday and you're lucky, a token vegetable or two, and a roll that might as well be made of granite. As you finish, your stomach whispers treasonous suggestions. Would anyone notice if I quietly snatched another pat of butter? What if I reach for one more ladle of soup? But such rebellion is quickly quashed by the presence of Mrs. Featherstone, whose X-ray vision for second helpings has ruined many a would-be feast. The house matron presides at the head of the table like a high priestess of austerity. Eyes narrowed, lips pursed, always alert for the faintest flicker of food-related insubordination. Her verdicts are swift and unwavering. A second roll? Not unless she announces extras for all, a phrase uttered as frequently as lunar eclipses. Once, a new boarder had the audacity to reach for another scoop of cabbage and was rewarded with a glare so icy the butter nearly resolidified on the table. You quickly learn that any attempt to skirt the meal rules requires subtlety, timing, and a working knowledge of misdirection. Some develop advanced techniques, the decoy napkin drop, the surreptitious sleeve slide of a biscuit, the I'm just helping clear the table, what's this bread doing in my pocket? But even these manoeuvres are fraught with peril, for the other boarders are not just fellow inmates, they are informants. The social currency of the boarding house is built on observation, and one whispered report can result in a public scolding, or, worse, the loss of pudding privileges for the entire table. As the meal winds down, the collective longing is almost palpable. Women either remaining morsels with the same intensity reserved for romantic rivals. Crumbs are swept up with exaggerated diligence, every last trace of butter scraped clean, every dollop of jam contested. Sometimes, if the stars align and a miracle occurs, such as someone skipping dinner due to work or illness, Mrs. Featherstone will make a rare and ceremonious declaration. Ladies, there are extras tonight. In these moments, decorum vanishes, and a quiet but unmistakable scramble commences. Plates are passed with the haste of stock market trades, and the lucky recipients savour each forbidden bite as though it were caviar. But most evenings you simply accept your portion, push away from the table and retire with dignity and a faint gnawing hunger. You invent ways to distract yourself from your rumbling stomach, reading, mending, plotting tomorrow's breakfast strategy. A few sneak off to their rooms to raid hidden snack stashes, crackers in a hat box, raisins in a teacup, or the ever-controversial emergency chocolate bar. Possession of contraband food is a risky proposition. Mrs. Featherstone's inspections are legendary for uncovering even the most cleverly hidden crumbs. And yet, there is a strange solidarity in shared deprivation. You exchange knowing glances with your fellow boarders, bond over tales of near misses and triumphant biscuit rescues, and occasionally plot imaginary feasts. In the world of the boarding house, character isn't just built by adversity, it's shaped by the discipline of self-control, the art of stealth, and the camaraderie of collective hunger. So you learn to savour every bite, guard your plate with humour, and hope, faintly, foolishly, that someday you'll live in a place where seconds isn't a scandalous word, but a promise. Until then, you keep your spoon handy, your eyes open, and your dreams full of rolls you're actually allowed to eat. Every week brings a new slate of chores: floor scrubbing, stair sweeping, dusting the parlour. If you miss your turn, you'll face the wrath of the entire house, and probably an extra lecture about feminine duty. The house chore chart is a masterpiece of bureaucracy, drawn up by Mrs. Featherstone with the gravitas of a general assigning troops to the front lines. It's posted on the kitchen wall, written in fountain pen and decorated with what appear to be passive-aggressive flourishes. Every Sunday evening you and the other boarders gather round it, hearts thumping as you scan the page for your fate. Are you on kitchen duty? Have you been sentenced to parlour dusting? Is this the week you finally face the legendary ordeal of the outhouse? Chores are assigned on a strict rotation, the logic behind which is known only to Mrs. Featherstone and possibly the ancient spirits of boarding house landladies everywhere. If you suspect someone is shirking their duty or swapping tasks behind her back, keep it to yourself. Informing on others is nearly as risky as missing your shift, both offences punishable by a week of stair scrubbing and exile from the best chairs in the parlour. Monday mornings start with the symphony of brooms and brushes. Floors must be scrubbed until the wood shines. Carpets must be beaten within an inch of their lives in the backyard, sending plumes of dust and the occasional lost button swirling into the morning air. The staircase is especially treacherous. Sweep too hard and you risk tumbling into infamy. Sweep too softly and Mrs. Featherstone will materialise at your elbow, muttering about the moral decay of modern young women and handing you a second, larger broom. Dusting the parlour is both an honour and a hazard. The room is lined with knick-knacks, dried flowers and photographs of stern ancestors who seem to glare at you as you work. There's always the looming threat of breaking something. A chipped vase or a crooked portrait can lead to a week's worth of guilt-tripping, followed by an in-depth seminar on the proper respect for one's environment. You become an expert in the gentle swipe, the delicate polish, and the desperate silent prayer that you won't be the one to upset the heirloom clock. Kitchen duty is where alliances are made and broken. You spend the morning elbow deep in dishwater, passing plates with the speed and precision of a factory assembly line. There's a hierarchy to dishwashing: bowls before plates, knives last, and woe betide the boarder who leaves a greasy smudge. The tea towels are thin and never quite dry, so you develop innovative folding techniques to hide the damp patches. If you're lucky, you score a snippet of kitchen gossip from the cook. If not, you make do with the latest rumours about who's been caught filching biscuits. The greatest peril of all is missing your turn. Whether by forgetfulness or feeble excuse, skipping a chore unleashes a cascade of consequences. First comes the public shaming, a stern note pinned to your door, or worse, a collective glare at breakfast. Next, an impromptu lecture about the meaning of feminine duty, laced with quotes from long-dead etiquette authors and delivered with the zeal of a revival preacher. Finally, your punishment: double chores for a week, plus the unspoken understanding that you owe everyone else a favour to be redeemed at a time of their choosing. Yet, in all its grim repetition, the chore chart creates a peculiar sense of camaraderie. You and your fellow boarders joke, compete, and even, occasionally, sing as you polish, sweep, and dust your way through the week. There's pride in a gleaming parlour, a freshly scrubbed stair, or the smell of lemon soap lingering in the air. Because in the boarding house, chores aren't just tasks, they're rites of passage, opportunities for secret bonding, and reminders that survival here is a team sport. Miss your turn, and you'll pay. Do it right, and for one shining week you might just win the approval of Mrs. Featherstone and maybe a coveted second helping of pudding. The parlour, allegedly for socialising, is policed so tightly that even laughter is suspicious. Games must be quiet, music pre-approved, and heaven forbid anyone tries to dance. Let's set the scene. The parlour is the theoretical heart of the boarding house, a place where, on paper, young women might relax after a long day, share jokes, and build friendships. In practice, it's a room that could be used as evidence in a trial against joy. You cross the threshold and immediately feel the temperature drop, not physically, but emotionally. The settee is stuffed and upright, the lace antimacassars starched to rigidity, and the portraits of long-dead Featherstone relatives glare down from the walls as if they know you're considering an act of frivolity. You'd think that after a hard day of work and a dinner of mushy peas, the parlour would be a place for rowdy card games, lively music, and the kind of laughter that makes you forget the dust bunnies under your bed. But fun here is a high-wire act performed under the disapproving gaze of Mrs. Featherstone, who, as if by magic, always appears when someone suggests charades or scandal of scandals, a game of truth or dare. Music is permitted, but only in its most solemn approved forms. The upright piano in the corner is played with a level of reverence usually reserved for church organs. Hymns and classical pieces get a curt nod. Anything with a hint of jazz or ragtime is strictly forbidden. The time someone dared to attempt a one-handed rendition of Maple Leaf Rag, the atmosphere went from stuffy to absolute inquisition in 5 seconds flat. Afterward, the piano was closed for a week to recover. Games must be sedate. Parlour games are limited to the likes of Consequences Snap, or, if you're feeling particularly wild, a single round of dominoes. Forget about charades or anything that involves movement, shouting, or displays of emotion. Someone once tried to start a game of musical chairs, but it was immediately quashed as anarchic and unsuitable for young ladies of standing. The ban on dancing is so strict, it's rumoured Mrs. Featherstone can sense a waltz in progress from 2 floors up. Even conversation is regulated. Topics must remain bland and uplifting. The weather, work, or, for the especially daring, the state of the garden geraniums. Whispered confidences or bursts of giggles attract a raised eyebrow, followed by a swift, "Is something the matter, girls?" delivered in a tone that makes it clear the answer had better be, "No, ma'am, everything is splendid." Any conversation about men, dreams of travel, or complaints about dinner is best reserved for the safety of your bedroom, behind a closed and preferably barricaded door. Every so often, there's an attempt to inject a little life into the space. Someone suggests a sing-along, and for a moment, voices swell in harmony, until Mrs. Featherstone steps in, declaring it is time for quiet reflection. Or someone finds a deck of playing cards, and the excitement is palpable, until the house matron delivers a short sermon on the dangers of gambling and moral decay. Even the pets aren't immune. Harold the mouse was once discovered stowed under the settee during a particularly dull evening, and his presence led to a new rule: no animals in the parlour, decorative or otherwise. And so, the parlour becomes a test of your creativity. You learn to have fun quietly, in coded glances, whispered jokes, or the slow trade of secret notes. The best stories, the juiciest gossip and the heartfelt conversations happen elsewhere, on stairwells, in laundry rooms, or huddled beneath blankets after lights out. The parlour remains the domain of decorum, where fun, if it happens at all, is whispered and short-lived. Yet even here, camaraderie grows. There's a certain pleasure in defying the rules with a well-timed wink or an expertly suppressed giggle. The parlour may be where fun goes to die, but it's also where friendships are forged in the quiet, conspiratorial trenches of survival. In the boarding house, the best fun is always just a little bit forbidden. Mrs. Featherstone runs her house, with the efficiency of a prison warden and the paranoia of a Cold War spy. Her hearing is superhuman, her glare can curdle milk, and her notebook of infractions is legendary. She's the axis around which the entire boarding house universe turns, a one-woman authority who inspires awe, fear, and the occasional daydream of escape to a distant city. Her rules are carved deeper than the foundation stones, her routines as regular as sunrise, and her power, for all practical purposes, absolute. If you've ever wondered what it's like to live under constant surveillance, just spend a week with Mrs. Featherstone. She sees all, hears all, and worst of all, remembers everything. Each day she patrols the halls with a precision that would make a military inspector blush. Her shoes tap a strict tempo down the corridor, and the squeak of her keys is enough to make even the most innocent boarder question every life choice they've ever made. She appears at unexpected moments, materialising at the parlour door just as someone's giggling, or at the kitchen the exact second a forbidden snack is being liberated from the biscuit tin. No matter where you are, it always seems like she's about to round the corner. Her legendary notebook is the stuff of boarding house myth. Rumour has it that inside are coded entries detailing every transgression since the dawn of time. Miss Miller, May 3rd, used 2 towels, excessive. Miss Briggs, July 12th, overboiled the cabbage, potential sabotage. The book is always with her, tucked under one arm, pages fluttering ominously as she jots down a fresh offence. It's said that if your name appears 3 times in a week, you're summoned for a private chat. A session so terrifyingly polite and efficient that even the memory of it is enough to straighten your posture for months. Her glare is famous. One well-placed look can silence an entire dining room or freeze mid-air a confession that was about to bubble up. Legend holds that, on particularly humid days, her glare once caused a jug of cream to curdle on contact. That's probably apocryphal, but you'd never say it aloud, not if you value your supper. But perhaps her most formidable weapon is her hearing. She catches whispers in stairwells, overhears secret plans hatched in the laundry, and can detect a muffled giggle 2 rooms away. Is she part bat? Is the house rigged with hidden tubes and vents to carry every sound straight to her quarters? No one knows for sure, but every boarder learns quickly to speak in code and tread lightly. Despite her iron-fisted rule, Mrs. Featherstone's presence is not without purpose. She keeps the house safe, the rules clear, and the rent, mostly, affordable. She breaks up spats, prevents actual anarchy from breaking loose, and ensures nobody, no matter how unruly, slips through the cracks. Occasionally, if you listen closely, you might even catch a rare moment of softness. A kind word to a homesick newcomer, a quiet glance of pride when the parlour is perfectly dusted, a discreet extra scoop of pudding for a boarder who's had a rotten week. Still, it's her suspicion that keeps the wheels turning. She operates on the assumption that fun, frivolity and romance are always one step away from chaos, and it's her sacred duty to keep the peace. There's safety in her vigilance, even as you chafe against her rules. Deep down, every boarder knows the house would fall into cheerful anarchy without her. So you learn to adapt, to respect the system, and maybe even to pity Mrs. Featherstone after all, who pleases the warden. In the boarding house, her approval is rare and precious, and her disapproval is legendary. And if you survive her reign with your dignity and your sense of humour intact, you can survive almost anything. Feeling ill? Prepare for exile to the dreaded sick room, where you're dosed with mysterious tonics and subjected to unsolicited advice. Sympathy is limited, so is hot water. Getting sick in a 1910s boarding house is a fate best avoided. 1 minute you're sneezing discreetly into your handkerchief hoping no one notices. The next you've been volunteered for medical isolation faster than you can say slight tickle in my throat. The quarantine closet, as it's known in whispered tones, isn't an actual closet, but it may as well be. It's the coldest, stuffiest, loneliest room at the end of the hall, furnished with an iron cot, a chipped pitcher, and the lingering odour of camphor and ancient cough drops. Mrs. Featherstone, of course, is the one to decide your fate. Her approach to illness is part battlefield triage, part moral judgment. She eyes you with suspicion the moment you sniffle, brow furrowing as if she's weighing your soul. Try to tough it out. She'll haul you in for a wellness check so thorough you half expect to be weighed, measured, and have your ears inspected for contraband. Once you're banished to the sick room, the rules are clear. No visitors except Mrs. Featherstone and, occasionally, the housemaid, who delivers meals on a tray with the enthusiasm of someone handling radioactive material. The food itself is uninspiring. A bowl of thin broth, a dry biscuit, and, if you're lucky, a single limp orange. Sometimes, in a fit of generosity, the landlady adds a wedge of cheese so old it remembers the last election. The treatments are as varied as they are dubious. Mrs. Featherstone swears by her homemade tonics, a mysterious mixture of honey, vinegar, mustard powder, and whatever else she believes will put hair on your chest. She appears at intervals with spoons full of brown liquid, reciting the virtues of each dose as you steel yourself for the taste. If you grimace, she'll throw in a lecture on the decline of modern constitutions. Other remedies include mustard plasters, chest rubs, and something called vapours, which involves waving a steaming cloth under your nose until your eyes water and you briefly forget you're sick at all. The advice comes in waves, too, mostly from the other boarders, who have appointed themselves an unofficial committee of wellness. Every time the door creaks open, someone leans in with a tip or two. My aunt swears by onion poultices. Try wrapping your feet in hot towels. If you gargle with salt water and sleep with a cut potato, you'll be right as rain. None of it works, but the parade of suggestions is relentless. Sympathy, meanwhile, is in short supply. At first, your roommates check in, whispering encouragement and slipping you old magazines. But soon fear takes over. No one wants to catch your malady and end up on the wrong side of the quarantine wall. The sound of footsteps in the hallway grows more distant. Laughter fades to a muffled echo behind the closed door. You're left with your thoughts, your cough, and a growing sense that you may be the first person to actually perish of boredom. Hot water, like kindness, is rationed. Mrs. Featherstone brings it in miserly amounts, warning you not to squander it on unnecessary comforts. A hot water bottle is doled out for only the most severe cases, and only if you're willing to listen to a speech on the dangers of dependence on luxury. Eventually, if you're lucky, you recover, pale, thinner, and oddly grateful for the bland normalcy of parlour conversation and mediocre meatloaf. You return to society with a heroic air, your absence the subject of a fresh round of gossip and speculation. The sick room has changed you. You vow never to sniffle in public again, to cherish every tepid bath and lukewarm cup of tea. In the boarding house, health is fleeting, but the legend of the quarantine closet lives on, reminding everyone that survival isn't just about strength, but about learning to endure even the most questionable of tonics and the world's worst bedside manner. Mail is distributed in the parlour, loudly, by name. Love letters are scrutinised, overdue bills are announced, and the fear of a letter from home keeps everyone sweating. Mail call in the boarding house is less a private transaction and more a public spectacle, a sort of theatrical production, with Mrs. Featherstone as the MC and the rest of the household as an unwilling audience. Each afternoon, a hush falls over the parlour as the landlady enters, a stack of envelopes in hand, and a look of gleeful anticipation in her eye. There's an electric current in the air, a peculiar blend of hope, dread, and the deep universal wish to avoid public humiliation. Everyone sits a little straighter, smoothing hair and pinning hopeful smiles in place. Mrs. Featherstone clears her throat, savouring her moment of authority. She calls out names with all the gravity of a judge handing down sentences. Miss Webster, letter from your mother. Miss Green, a bill from the laundry. Miss Harvey, a postcard. Paris, the source, the sender, even the contents, if guessed from the handwriting or the floral pattern of the stationery, are announced with a kind of relish that leaves no secret unexamined. The worst are the love letters. Anything addressed in a suspiciously elegant script or scented with a hint of cologne is immediately suspect. Mrs. Featherstone lifts such letters with 2 fingers, pausing long enough for the entire parlour to take note. From a Mr. Edward, I believe, she intones, while the intended recipient blushes so furiously you could toast bread on her cheeks. Sometimes, in the guise of protecting the household's moral character, Mrs. Featherstone insists on opening letters herself. She skims the contents, lips pursed, before finally surrendering the missive, sometimes with a warning about distractions and the dangers of correspondence with unknown gentlemen. Overdue bills are met with equal fanfare, and there's no dignity in their disclosure. Miss Johnson, the bakery awaits payment. Miss Allen, the tailor has written again. Each announcement is punctuated by the rustle of notes, the sound of girls shifting uneasily, and the silent calculation of who might have to part with her last coin before the week is out. Occasionally Mrs. Featherstone adds her own commentary. Promptness is next to godliness, Miss Allen, as if the sting of public embarrassment might somehow inspire better budgeting. Then there are the letters from home, which carry their own weight of anxiety. A postmarked envelope from your family brings hope, a care package perhaps, or cheerful news. More often, though, it's a letter reminding you to be frugal, write more often, or, the most dreaded line of all, remember your reputation. These missives are read in private, eyes flicking over the careful script, hearts heavy with homesickness or relief. Occasionally, a parcel arrives. These are moments of real drama. Everyone leans in as the wrappings are torn away, guessing at the contents. Homemade biscuits, a pair of knitted gloves, a book with an inscription in your mother's hand. Such bounty is both joy and burden, for it must be shared or explained. Sharing means losing half your cookies to the generosity tax of hungry roommates. Explaining means defending yourself against accusations of extravagance, or worse, special treatment. Mail call ends as abruptly as it began. Mrs. Featherstone gathers up the remaining envelopes, returns her list to the desk, and leaves the parlour echoing with whispered speculation. Who wrote to whom? What was in that letter? Did Miss Green really get a love note? Or was it just another bill in disguise? The aftermath lingers long after, fueling gossip for days. Receiving mail in the boarding house is never just about news from the outside world. It's a public ritual, a chance for hope, embarrassment, jealousy, and occasionally joy. You savour every line of your letter, Hide the embarrassing bits and pray that next time your mail might slip through the net of public spectacle unscathed. But you know it won't. In the world of the boarding house, nothing stays private, not even the post. The house rules are posted in every hallway. No singing after 9 p.m, no candles near curtains, absolutely no men above the first floor. Breaking a rule is a spiritual offence. Arguing one is unthinkable. The rules of the boarding house, colloquially known as the 30 Commandments, are legendary, labyrinthine, and as unyielding as the bricks in the foundation. They hang in every hallway, handwritten by Mrs. Featherstone in looping authoritative script and updated with the regularity of a lunar eclipse. Anyone who's lived here for more than a week can recite them in their sleep, and frankly, sometimes do, in the throes of a rule-induced nightmare. Rule 1. No men above the first floor. This rule is so ironclad, it's rumoured that Mrs. Featherstone once banished a plumber for daring to repair a radiator in the upstairs bathroom. Romances must be conducted by mail, by rumour, or, ideally, not at all. Rule 2. Curfew is at 10 o'clock sharp. Anyone found tiptoeing in at 10:01 must submit to the twin horrors of public shaming and a stern reflection on punctuality. It's an open secret that the hall clock is set 5 minutes fast, just to keep everyone on edge. Rule 3. No singing after 9 p.m. This is a direct response to the infamous Sweet Adeline incident, in which an impromptu a cappella quartet brought down the wrath of Mrs. Featherstone, and an addendum to the rules that banned all singing, humming, or musical tomfoolery after dark. Rule 4. Candles must not be left unattended, placed near curtains, or really lit at all. The single act of striking a match sends the landlady into a frenzy of dire warnings about fire, insurance, and the fate of that poor boarding house in Topeka. Electric light is strictly encouraged, though the bulbs flicker with the uncertainty of dreams. There are rules for everything: when to bathe, where to store your boots, how much jam is an appropriate portion. The rules about communal food are legendary. No removing items from the pantry without express permission. No hiding treats in parlour cushions. There's even a regulation on the correct way to label milk bottles, name, date, and please do not touch in all caps. Most mysterious is Rule 24. Do not disturb the house geraniums. No one knows what happens if you do, but everyone agrees it's not worth finding out. To argue a rule is to invite disaster. Mrs. Featherstone's patience for debate is non-existent. The one boarder who dared question the fairness of the stair-sweeping rota was treated to a speech so thorough, complete with footnotes and a supplementary chart, that by the end she apologised to the stairs personally. Yet, for all their absurdity, the rules create a sense of structure and safety. In a world where women are often at the mercy of circumstance, the rigid predictability of the 37 Commandments brings a weird sort of comfort. You know exactly where you stand, or more accurately, where you're forbidden to stand. The smallest freedoms, an extra biscuit, a 5-minute extension on bath time, become victories celebrated in whispers. Of course, some rules are made to be bent, and every boarder develops a private calculus of risk and reward. You might sneak an extra lamp into your room, risk a whispered conversation after curfew, or, if you're feeling truly rebellious, pluck a petal from the forbidden geranium just to see if the universe shudders. Because in the boarding house, life is a daily dance with the 37 Commandments, a routine of self-restraint, silent protest, and the occasional triumphant rule-bending. You memorize them, respect them, and sometimes break them, because survival here isn't just about following rules, but learning when to quietly colour outside the lines. Sunday is for church, starched collars, and forced group attendance. Skipping the service or wearing a wrinkled dress is an invitation for social annihilation. The boarding house transforms on Sunday morning. Gone are the bedraggled nightgowns and the air of barely managed chaos that reigns during the week. In their place, a display of collective effort, hairpins, and enough starch to stop a trolley. It begins at dawn with the rustle of petticoats and the soft hiss of irons pressed into service on kitchen tables. Every resident is expected to present herself at her Sunday best, a phrase that, like most house rules, means something slightly different and much stricter to Mrs. Featherstone. There's a sense of ceremony to the whole routine. You and your fellow boarders stand in front of the shared mirror, fussing over crooked collars and swapped ribbons. There is always one girl hopelessly wrestling with her only decent hat, and another who has misplaced her gloves for the third time in a month. The more experienced boarders offer advice, tips, and sometimes hairpins in exchange for future favours. Getting dressed for Sunday church in the boarding house is not a solitary endeavour. It's a team sport, equal parts camaraderie and silent competition. Breakfast is a stiffer affair. Instead of the usual lumpy oatmeal, there's tea served in the good cups, and the bread might, if you're very lucky, be lightly toasted. Conversation is muted, focused on last-minute adjustments. Someone asks if navy and brown clash in a way the Lord would notice. Someone else inspects a hem for loose threads. Mrs. Featherstone makes the rounds, inspecting everyone with a level of scrutiny that would make a customs officer blush. Any sign of slovenliness, a crooked sash, a missing button, a barely detectable stain, is cause for a stern lecture and an emergency wardrobe intervention. When it's time to leave, the boarding house emerges in formation, a line of young women proceeding to church in double file, the collective effect somewhere between a graduation march and a parade of penitents. You walk with your chin up, gloves on, clutching a well-worn hymn book, careful to match your pace to the house rhythm. There's no dallying, no last-minute dashes for forgotten parasols. If you're late, the parade goes on without you, and the walk of shame alone to the church steps is enough to haunt your social standing for weeks. The church itself is less a house of worship, and more an extension of the boarding house social order. Every pew is a battleground for appearances. Mrs. Featherstone keeps a hawk's eye on her flock from across the aisle, her presence felt even when she's pretending to be deep in prayer. The minister, well versed in the politics of boarding houses, makes pointed remarks about the virtues of punctuality and decorum, and somehow everyone is sure he's looking right at them. After the service, the judgment parade continues on the church steps and all the way home. The local gossips, retired aunts, well-dressed widows and the ever-present Miss Plimpton evaluate each boarder with professional precision. Was her skirt too short? Was that a spot of dust on her hem? Did she sing all the verses of Nearer My God to Thee, or only mouth the words? The scrutiny is relentless. The consequence is real. A single misstep and you may find yourself uninvited to tea, or, worse, the subject of a prayer request for guidance and improved standards. Back at the boarding house, everyone breathes a collective sigh of relief. Dresses are swapped for house frocks, hats are safely boxed away, and the starch is released from duty for another week. There's a sense of camaraderie born from shared ordeal, a tired laughter as you recount the morning's near misses and small triumphs. Maybe next Sunday will be easier, but in your heart, you know the parade never really ends. Because in the world of the 1910s boarding house, Sunday isn't just a day of rest. It's a marathon of manners, a fashion show with eternal consequences, and an ongoing test of your ability to look flawless under the world's harshest fluorescent light. The gaze of your peers. Each resident gets a food locker. Locked, of course. Any sign of missing biscuits launches an internal investigation worthy of Scotland Yard. Trust no one with your crackers. In the boarding house, survival depends not just on willpower and wit, but also on how well you can safeguard your snacks. The food locker is every resident's most precious possession, a metal box tucked discreetly at the foot of your bed or stashed on a high shelf, each one secured with a tiny padlock, the key worn on a string around your neck like a talisman. Within these fortresses lie the essentials, a few stale crackers, a wedge of cheese, a half bar of chocolate reserved for emergencies, and, if you're lucky, a biscuit tin guarded like the crown jewels. The food locker system was born out of necessity. With dinner rations thin and seconds strictly forbidden, a hidden stash can mean the difference between contentment and hunger-fueled despair. Officially, the rules are clear. Lockers are for personal use, and pilfering is punishable by public shaming, extra chores, and, if Mrs. Featherstone is feeling particularly theatrical, a lecture on the erosion of moral fibre. Unofficially, every resident has heard tales of biscuits gone missing, chocolate mysteriously evaporating, and cheese vanishing without a trace. In the world of the boarding house, snack theft is a crime that leaves no room for forgiveness or forgetfulness. Detecting a breach is almost an art. You open your locker, take stock, and freeze. Wasn't there one more ginger snap last night? Is that a new dent in your toffee tin? Panic sets in. The first step is to retrace your own steps. Did you eat that biscuit yourself? Could you have forgotten a midnight nibble in a haze of hunger? If not, the investigation escalates quickly. Suspicions swirl. Every resident becomes a detective, watching for the smallest slip, a crumb on a roommate's pillow, the suspicious rustle of a wrapper after lights out, the faint scent of shortbread wafting from someone else's handkerchief. Alibis are checked. You were in the washroom at 10, someone whispers. But wasn't your locker left open for a moment? The boarding house becomes a labyrinth of suspicion. Alliances forged and broken over a half-eaten cracker. Some residents take security to extremes. Locks are double-checked, tins wrapped in handkerchiefs, secret compartments engineered in the back of the wardrobe. Decoys, plain biscuits in a tin atop the locker, a sacrificial offering to would-be thieves sometimes appear, meant to divert attention from the true treasure hidden beneath layers of neatly folded petticoats. Trust is a rare commodity. Roommates swear oaths over teacups, but even the closest friends have been known to fall out over a missing shortbread. Forgiveness is possible, but only if restitution is made. A peace offering of half a chocolate bar, a solemn promise never to eat another person's cheese, or, in extreme cases, the surrender of an entire stash of ginger snaps. Occasionally a true food crisis erupts, a rash of missing biscuits, multiple lockers rifled, the whole house on edge. Mrs. Featherstone responds with a thorough inspection and a speech on the sanctity of personal property, eyes narrowed at the entire assembly. During these trials, snacks are doled out only in public, and the taste of victory is always tinged with paranoia. Yet the food locker isn't just a vault for snacks, it's a symbol of autonomy. In a world ruled by curfews, house rules, and rationed meals, a hidden tin of crackers means freedom. It's the ability to sneak a treat after a hard day, to offer a friend a square of chocolate in solidarity, to remind yourself that you have something, however small, that's yours. So you guard your key, count your biscuits, and eye your neighbours with a mix of camaraderie and caution. Because in the boarding house, trust is measured in crumbs. A well-protected food locker is the difference between hunger and a little moment of sweetness, stolen from the jaws of communal living. By day, you're a typist, factory hand or teacher, expected to be the perfect employee, efficient, polite, and always on time. Any slip-up at work can get you reported straight back to the boarding house matron. The 1910s career woman is a marvel of modernity and a case study in exhaustion. After you survive the morning gauntlet of bells, cold water, starched collars, and lumpy porridge, you march out the boarding house door and into the world of work. You join the flood of women in serviceable shoes and sensible hats, walking briskly down city streets, each of you the hopeful embodiment of a changing era, and each of you hoping not to be late. The office is a jungle with its own rules and predators. If you're a typist, you spend your days hunched over a clattering machine, fingers flying, eyes glued to carbon paper and dictated letters. Every word must be perfect. Each mistake is an erasure of your reputation and, worse, your paycheck. The manager stalks the rows, eagle-eyed, looking for typos or wayward glances out the window. Whisper to a colleague, "That's a mark against your professionalism." Pause too long before a bell. Suspicious. Factory work is its own brand of terror, the endless thump and rattle of machinery, the heat, the dust, the unspoken competition for output. You measure your success by the inch or the minute. So many yards of thread spun. So many packages sealed. Your supervisor times your bathroom breaks and counts your finished pieces. Slack off, and word travels fast. You're not just answerable to management, but to your housemates. No one wants to room with the one who got sacked for dawdling. Teachers face yet another set of perils. A single unruly child, a muddled lesson, or an accidental ink stain can spark a letter home to Mrs. Featherstone, who keeps a meticulous file of each resident's work history. If you thought the classroom was the end of your day, you were wrong. Everything you do echoes back to the boarding house. A parent's complaint, that's a note slipped under your door at breakfast. A glowing review? It's read aloud at dinner, sometimes to the applause of your housemates, sometimes with barely concealed envy. The pressure to be the perfect employee never lets up. You are always on display, always being judged by your employer, your co-workers, your fellow boarders, and most of all by the ever-watchful eyes of Mrs. Featherstone. The worlds of work and home are hopelessly tangled. If you're 5 minutes late to work, your landlady will know before you even unlock your food locker. If you forget your gloves at your desk, don't be surprised to find them waiting for you at the front hall, accompanied by a note reminding you of proper presentation. Socialising with co-workers is fraught with peril. Invitations to after-work outings must be weighed against the house curfew, and any hint of impropriety lingering at the soda fountain, laughing too loudly with the delivery boy, will be dissected by both your supervisor and your housemates. Rumours from the office make their way home, and soon the whole house knows who's been called to the boss's office, who might be up for a raise, and who was seen lingering at the lunch counter with a mysterious gentleman. The reward for all this diligence is modest. A wage envelope on payday, perhaps a kind word from your boss, or, if you're very lucky, a half day off to mend your stockings or catch up on sleep. Mostly, though, you return home with sore feet, ink-stained fingers, and the faint hope that tomorrow you'll make fewer mistakes. In the world of the boarding house, being a career woman means carrying the weight of two worlds: the relentless demands of the modern office and the unforgiving standards of Mrs. Featherstone's regime. It's a high-wire act, one you perform daily, fueled by ambition, anxiety, and just enough stubborn pride to do it all again the next morning. Privacy is a fairy tale. The walls are thin, the doors have squeaky hinges, and even your diary isn't safe from accidental perusal by a curious roommate or the cleaning lady. If you arrived at the boarding house with romantic notions of solitude and quiet contemplation, you learned the truth within hours. Every room is a shared space, and every shared space is a lesson in compromise. The notion of personal space is so fanciful, it might as well be shelved next to unicorns and flying carpets. There are no secrets in this house, only unspoken agreements to look the other way while your neighbour rearranges her sock drawer for the 8th time this week. Walls, such as they are, serve mostly to muffle, never truly block, the endless parade of sounds that travel up and down the corridor. You learn more about your housemates than you ever intended: who talks in their sleep, who prefers cold cream to soap, who has a soft spot for weepy novels, and who practices speeches in the mirror when they think no one is listening. You know the rhythm of your roommate's sighs and the precise squeak of her mattress springs. There are whole subplots unfolding just behind the panelling, and you're privy to every act, whether you want to be or not. Your bed is your domain, a grand word for 3 square feet of mattress and a wooden trunk squeezed beneath it. Anything precious, letters, hairpins, an extra ration of jam, must be hidden in increasingly creative ways. The trunk is locked, the key tucked into a shoe, the shoe buried beneath last winter's coat. Of course, nothing is ever truly safe. Cleaning day brings Mrs. Featherstone and the housemaid, armed with feather dusters and a sense of righteous curiosity. Diaries are discovered, trinkets examined, and every so often a snippet of poetry or a sketch finds its way into the communal consciousness, sparking a fresh round of gossip. Doors, meanwhile, offer only the illusion of sanctuary. They're forever swinging open at the wrong moment, someone barging in to borrow a comb, to ask about laundry, to warn you about a rumoured inspection. Knocks are polite suggestions, easily ignored in the rush of daily life. The hinges squeal in protest, broadcasting your comings and goings to anyone within earshot. Privacy, such as it is a matter of timing and luck. If you crave solitude, your only hope is a walk around the block or a stolen moment in the backyard, shielded from view by the laundry flapping on the line. Even correspondence is communal. Letters arrive in the parlour and are read with eager, curious eyes. The simple act of writing in your diary becomes an exercise in espionage, should you use code. Hide it in the lining of your pillow. Risk is everywhere, even in ink and paper. When a secret is revealed, by accident or intent, it's everyone's business. The confessions, heartbreaks, and private ambitions of dozens of women are woven into the fabric of the house, binding you together in a patchwork of shared vulnerabilities. Yet, in this crowded, chaotic world, you find unexpected intimacy. You learn to communicate in glances, to stake a claim on a patch of sunlight, to relish the rare hour when the house is silent. A cup of tea sipped alone in the kitchen feels like a holiday. A moment to yourself, a priceless luxury. Sometimes, after a day of constant togetherness, you and your roommate lie in the dark, backs turned, both pretending to sleep, each granting the other the closest thing to solitude that boarding house life allows. Over time, you adapt. Privacy becomes less about space and more about trust, about forging boundaries in conversation and in the careful stewardship of secrets. You treasure the small sanctuaries, an inside joke, a quiet smile, a shared story whispered just before lights out. In a world where everyone knows your business, personal space is not a place, but a pact. I will protect yours if you will protect mine. And sometimes that's enough. Every woman fantasizes about escaping boarding house tyranny, maybe with a promotion, maybe through marriage, maybe just by stowing away in a laundry cart. But until then, it's back to folding socks. It's the secret hope that simmers beneath every awkward mealtime, every public scolding, every white glove Wednesday and curfew countdown, in whispered conversations behind closed doors and in daydreams scribbled into the margins of half-finished letters. The fantasy of freedom keeps spirits alive. One day, you'll be free from schedules, rules, and the omnipresent gaze of Mrs. Featherstone, free to eat jam straight from the jar at midnight, free to leave your stockings on the floor, free to laugh loudly, wear questionable hats, and talk to men without a chaperone lurking like a storm cloud. The dream of moving out is as varied as the residents themselves. For some, it's pinned to the possibility of a coveted promotion, a raise at the office, a new teaching post in a better district, the holy grail of secretarial advancement that promises both a private room and, rumour has it, a bathtub that belongs to you alone. For others, the dream is tied to romance, however risky. Some fall asleep picturing a love match, preferably one that comes with an address in a part of town where the word matron is never uttered, and curfew is something that happens only in stories. Of course, escape plans are often as impractical as they are imaginative. The more fanciful minds hatch wild schemes involving false identities and daring midnight flights. Someone once swore she could fit into the laundry cart, padded with clean linens and wheeled out by a sympathetic housemaid. The plan was abandoned when it turned out the only thing more uncomfortable than living at the boarding house was hiding in a laundry cart with a broom handle in your ribs. But for most, escape is a matter of careful calculation. It means scrimping and saving, hiding coins in books and coat linings, resisting the temptation to spend on new ribbons or bakery sweets. It's the slow, determined work of building a nest egg, refusing tea shop outings, forgoing the occasional cinema, saying no, thank you when the others pool money for ice cream on hot evenings. You watch as your secret stash grows, as your hope gathers weight, and you wait. In the meantime, life goes on, because it has to. You fold socks, iron collars, and nod politely during Mrs. Featherstone's impromptu sermons on the virtues of modest ambition. You memorise the rules, navigate the endless rumour mills, and learn to dodge extra chores with the finesse of a seasoned diplomat. You daydream about wallpaper in your favourite colour, a door that locks from the inside, and quiet mornings with no one banging on the bathroom door. Now and then, escape actually happens. A boarder is promoted and vanishes in a flurry of suitcases and triumph. A letter arrives, edged in pink, announcing an engagement. Sometimes the news is whispered, sometimes it's celebrated, but always it's proof that escape is possible. The empty bed becomes a symbol, both of what's lost, an ally in the nightly battles over biscuits and bath times, and what's possible. Freedom, independence, a life with your name on the lease. Of course, not every escape is dramatic. Some leave quietly, a note left on the pillow, a soft click of the latch before dawn. Others stay, not out of defeat, but out of choice. The boarding house? for all its frustrations, becomes a kind of oddball family. The dreams remain, but the sense of solidarity grows, a tribe of women plotting freedom, sometimes together, sometimes alone. Until then, escape is a dream you carry with you. Tucked in your apron, folded in your letters, whispered in the dark, you smile at the thought, take a deep breath, and go back to folding socks, knowing that even if freedom is far away, the hope of it keeps you moving forward, one careful sock-folding step at a time. When lights go out at 9:30, sleep is not guaranteed. There's snoring, creaking, whispered plotting, and the existential terror that you might have to do this all again tomorrow. Sweet dreams. Bedtime in a 1910s boarding house is less a peaceful transition and more an organised retreat, a tactical withdrawal from the day's noise into a new battlefield of restlessness and routine. At 9:25, the ritual begins. A flurry of slippers shuffling to the washroom, a last-minute scuffle over the water pitcher, and a desperate search for that one hairpin that's gone missing just when you need it most. Mrs. Featherstone paces the hallway, her silhouette outlined by gaslight, ensuring all bodies are accounted for and all conversations have ebbed to an acceptable hush. Then, promptly at 9:30, the world goes dark. The house is plunged into a patchwork of shadows. Candles are snuffed, bulbs are switched off with the efficiency of a military blackout. You crawl under the covers, the chill of well-worn sheets prickling your skin, and wait for the peace that, according to legend, is supposed to arrive with sleep. But tranquility is a myth. The air vibrates with a symphony of small domestic chaos. Someone's bed creaks with every exhalation. Someone else mutters lines of poetry into the dark, lost in dreams of literary fame. There's always at least one boarder who snores, her rasping breaths punctuating the night like an uninvited trumpet. Across the room, a faint rustle announces a clandestine midnight snack, wrappers crinkling so loudly you'd swear they were being broadcast to the next county. Sleep itself is elusive. The day's indignities replay on a loop. The glare from Mrs. Featherstone over a misplaced sock, the sting of missing out on seconds at dinner, the injustice of the laundry schedule. You wonder if you'll ever escape the endless cycle of rules and chores. You count ceiling cracks instead of sheep, each one a tally of days survived, of small victories like securing an extra biscuit or avoiding parlour inspection. Whispers travel through the darkness. Quiet giggles, secrets, and the plotting of tomorrow's minor rebellions float above the beds like wisps of forbidden perfume. Someone shares a ghost story. Someone else hatches a plan to liberate a tin of biscuits. Plans are made for the future, to write home, to look for a better job, to one day afford a room with a door that locks and a lamp that stays on as late as you like. It's a sleepy kind of hope, but hope all the same. And then, just as you're drifting off, the building itself joins in the fray. The old pipes moan, the floorboards creak, the window rattles in a breeze. Mice scamper in the walls, emboldened by the darkness and the leftover crumbs from someone's emergency snack stash. For a moment, you wonder if Harold the Mouse has made it into your bed again. You check with your toes, just to be sure. As the hours drag on, silence slowly deepens. One by one, the house's residents surrender to exhaustion, the rhythm of breath synchronizing in the dark. For a few brief hours, peace descends, uneven and fragile, but real. And yet, beneath the fragile veil of sleep, there's an undercurrent of anxiety. Tomorrow waits on the other side of dawn, bringing with it another round of cold water, oatmeal, and Mrs. Featherstone's iron gaze. But there's comfort too in the shared ordeal, a sisterhood of survivors bound by snoring and whispered dreams, each of you facing down the daily absurdity with a tired sort of defiance. So you pull the covers tighter, try not to dwell on the existential terror, and let yourself drift. Because in the boarding house, even sleep is a small rebellion, a triumph snatched from the jaws of snoring, creaking, and the knowledge that, come morning, you'll do it all again. Sweet dreams. Each resident is allotted one sliver of soap a week, and somehow it always disappears by Thursday. Was it borrowed? Bartered? or simply vaporized by the house ghost. The resulting investigation could rival a police procedural, except with more passive-aggressive notes. Soap is one of the boarding house's most precious commodities, right up there with chocolate, dry socks, and hot water. Official policy dictates that each woman receives a single, unimpressive rectangle of soap at the start of the week. Some are pink, some are green, all are stamped with the faint institutional scent of compromise. By Tuesday, your once solid bar has been whittled into a soap slip so fragile it might vanish if you so much as sneeze. By Thursday, it's gone. No trace but a damp spot and the slow burn of injustice. Naturally, the house is thrown into an uproar. Suspicion settles over the residents like a cloud of lavender-scented steam. Theories multiply. Was it Mrs. Featherstone, collecting soap rations for some unknown, sinister purpose? Did a desperate boarder borrow a sliver in a moment of soapy crisis? Or is it true what the junior boarders say, that Harold the Mouse has taken up personal hygiene? The first phase of the investigation is always self-interrogation. Did you forget your bar in the washroom? Did you mistake someone else's for your own during the pre-dawn bathroom rush? Did you leave it perilously close to the communal tub, tempting fate and your neighbours? You ransack your wash bag, check your shelf twice, and retrace your steps with the intensity of a detective on her final case. When that fails, the focus shifts to everyone else. The boarding house quickly divides into camps, those who believe in accidental misplacement and those convinced of outright theft. Side eyes become sharper. Friendly morning greetings are replaced by silent appraisals of one another's soap inventory. If you catch a roommate with a suspiciously generous lather, you watch her hands with hawk-like vigilance. There's always that one boarder who claims to make soap last all week, a dubious boast that only adds to the suspicion. Passive-aggressive notes proliferate. To the individual who has misplaced my soap, I trust you will return it post-haste. Some of us would appreciate a little honesty in the washroom. Remember, cleanliness is next to godliness, and also to not taking what isn't yours. These messages are tucked under pillows, pinned to the bathroom door, or for maximum impact, read aloud at breakfast. Mrs. Featherstone, meanwhile, relishes her role as chief inspector. She launches a full inquiry, summoning suspected parties for interviews in the parlour. She quizzes the housemaid, interrogates the likely suspects, and issues stern reminders about communal trust and the fragile fabric of house harmony. It is rumoured that she once dusted the soap dish for fingerprints, though the results were, as always, inconclusive. In the end, the truth is rarely discovered. Sometimes a bar turns up weeks later, hardened and half-used, tucked behind the boiler or under a pile of abandoned laundry. Sometimes the culprit confesses in a fit of guilt, offering to replace your soap with a new, slightly smaller bar as restitution. More often, the case goes unsolved, chalked up to the mysterious forces of communal living, forgetfulness, desperation, and the ongoing war against filth. But the real lesson is not about soap. It's about survival. You learn to guard your slivers, cut them in half and hide the extra, or invest in a tin-marked button collection as camouflage. Trust is measured in ounces of soap and the willingness to look the other way when your neighbour emerges from the washroom suspiciously squeaky clean. In the boarding house, everyone's a suspect. Every clean hand is cause for suspicion, and the scent of mystery lingers longer than even the strongest soap. If you can make it to Sunday with your sliver intact, you're not just clean, you're practically a legend. The rare event of washing your hair is as much about logistics as hygiene. Hot water is rationed, the bathroom schedule is sacred, and everyone is on high alert for rogue hairpins clogging the drain. If you finish with all your hair still attached, consider it a victory. Hair washing night is a high-stakes affair, planned days in advance and discussed with the seriousness of a diplomatic summit. You can't just announce your intentions, no. You have to negotiate your slot on the bathroom schedule, securing a precious window when the hot water might, just might, be in abundant enough supply to avoid a scalp-numbing disaster. This involves delicate deals with your roommates. I'll swap you next week's Wednesday for tonight's Friday and throw in a spare safety pin. Whispered warnings about Mrs. Featherstone's mysterious inspection rounds, and perhaps even a small bribe of lemon soap to the housemaid. The night itself begins with anticipation and trepidation. You arrive at your appointed time, armed with a comb, a towel, and an arsenal of hairpins that will inevitably vanish by the end of the ordeal. The bathroom, already humid from a dozen prior attempts at basic hygiene, is alive with the scent of lavender water and the underlying panic of those who washed before you. There is a collective sense of hope and dread. May the pipes be ever in your favour, someone mutters as you enter. The battle for hot water is relentless. There's just enough in the tank for a decent rinse, provided no one else has been greedy and the housemaid hasn't done an extra load of laundry. You test the tap, pray for warmth, and leap in at the first sign of steam. Heaven help you if the water runs cold halfway through the process. You're left to choose between a chilly rinse or emerging half suds, your dignity left circling the drain. Washing your hair is a feat of endurance and flexibility. You bend awkwardly over the basin, eyes squeeze shut as you attempt to distribute soap without blinding yourself. There is no luxurious lather, just the anxious scrub of survival, punctuated by the occasional yelp as a wayward hairpin finds your elbow. Rinsing is a rush against time, since the next woman in line is knocking every few minutes, reminding you that her appointment is just as urgent. Then comes the most delicate phase, detangling. You sit at the vanity, towel draped around your shoulders, and begin the long, painful process of coaxing your hair back to order. Every brushstroke is a test of patience and pain tolerance. Your roommates offer advice, sympathy, and the occasional borrowed comb. Someone shares a secret recipe for a vinegar rinse, allegedly for shine, though mostly it just leaves you smelling like a salad. Hairpins scatter to the four winds, with at least 3 inevitably lost to the mysterious dimension behind the radiator. The post-wash routine is its own trial. There are no hairdryers, of course, only the faint hope that the radiator might take the chill off before dawn. You wind your hair into rags for curls or pin it flat and hope for the best. Sleep is a restless affair, each turn of the head threatening to undo hours of careful work. And there's always the lurking fear that Mrs. Featherstone will catch a damp pillowcase and issue a stern warning about mould, mildew, and the perils of slovenly habits. Through it all, camaraderie grows. Hair-washing night is a communal event, a time to commiserate, share tips, and sometimes giggle at the absurdity of it all. By morning, if you've survived with most of your hair, a semi-dry scalp, and only minor embarrassment, you count yourself a champion. Because in the boarding house, clean hair isn't just a luxury, it's proof of your resourcefulness, grit, and sheer determination. If you emerge victorious, hair shining in the morning sun, you've conquered more than just soap and water. You've bested the odds of communal living. Once a month, Mrs. Featherstone sounds the alarm for a fire drill, usually right after everyone's gone to bed. You tumble down the stairs in nightgowns, tripping over each other and praying your curlers don't end up as tomorrow's main gossip headline. Fire drills in the boarding house are the closest you'll ever get to organised chaos wrapped in flannel and embarrassment. The tradition is announced with little warning. Just as you've settled under your quilt, dreams taking hold, the shriek of the alarm bell slices through the darkness, shattering any illusion of rest. A collective groan echoes down the hallway, followed by the slap of slippers on bare floors as women scramble to rouse themselves from whatever cosy positions they've managed to find. There's no time to worry about decorum. Nightgowns, some sensible, some secretly stylish, become the uniform of panic. You snatch a robe, grab your slippers, and join the exodus, trying not to think about how your curlers, face cream, or, in extreme cases, flannel bloomers might become fodder for the next round of breakfast gossip. There is always a split-second debate. Do you save face by snatching your house cap, or do you risk wild hair in the name of survival? The answer, in the heat of the moment, is always just run. The stairway becomes a bottleneck of flapping hems, hasty apologies and whispered prayers. Mrs. Featherstone stands at the bottom, clipboard in hand, ticking off names with the solemnity of a ship's captain during a storm. "Quickly, ladies, quickly! In an actual fire you'd be crisp by now," she declares, as if anyone could move faster without risking a spectacular tumble. Out in the chilly street, You huddle with your housemates, shivering in the moonlight and trying not to laugh at the sight of 20 night-capped women in various states of dishevelment. The bravest crack jokes. The shyest try to blend into the background, tugging robes tighter and avoiding eye contact. Miss Plimpton, ever the martyr to good form, has brought her gloves and her prayer book. Someone else is missing a slipper. There's always at least one shriek of "Where's Harold the Mouse?" as if the house pet might join the muster. As you wait for the all clear, the sense of camaraderie grows. The drama of the moment, so much hustle for so little actual danger, creates a peculiar bond. You learn who panics, who laughs, and who, even in the face of adversity, refuses to be seen without lipstick. There is a kind of freedom in the absurdity, a shared sense that life here is a comedy of errors with Mrs. Featherstone as both playwright and stage manager. Inevitably, the drill turns out to be just that, a drill. You're ushered back inside, single file, as the house matron recounts the lessons of the evening. Next time, fewer shrieks, more order. Remember, safety first, vanity second. A lecture on fire safety follows, punctuated by examples from that dreadful incident in 1908 and the perennial warning never to leave curling irons unattended. As if anyone could afford a curling iron in the first place. The aftermath, of course, is the true trial. The next morning, every detail of your performance will be dissected over porridge. Did you trip on the landing? Did you forget your robe? Did your hair survive, or will you be wearing hats all week? The fire drill is a source of endless anecdotes, gentle teasing, and the occasional well-earned nickname. Still you survive, dignity mostly intact, give or take a few stray curlers and a bruised ego. The fire drill may be inconvenient, disruptive, and a tiny bit ridiculous, but it is also a reminder that in the unpredictable world of the boarding house, sometimes you just have to drop everything, run for your life and hope your secrets and your nightcap survive the night. Not all reading material is approved by the house matron. Anything with too much romance, or, heaven forbid, a picture of a woman's bare arms, must be hidden in shoeboxes or stuffed into pillowcases. Discovery means confiscation, scolding, and possibly a lecture on moral decay. The boarding house library is a display of respectability. The Bible, a few improving novels, perhaps the odd botanical reference book. Nothing to ruffle the feathers of Mrs. Featherstone or provoke a sharp intake of breath from Miss Plimpton. Officially, appropriate reading is defined by its absence of scandal, seduction, or illustrations deemed unwholesome. Unofficially, the most coveted pages in the house are dog-eared, well-travelled, and live in the shadows. Boarders become amateur smugglers and secret librarians, their contraband literature tucked behind bed slats and inside battered hat boxes. A slim volume of poetry by a notorious Parisian, a magazine brimming with love stories and risque illustrations, these treasures circulate with the caution of forbidden fruit. The thrill is not just in the reading, but in the ritual of acquisition. The coded exchanges, the whispered passwords. Is the moon out tonight? The careful transfer of the latest wrapped in brown paper, delivered by a sympathetic newsboy who knows the value of a tip and a secret. Once in possession of a banned book, the challenge is concealment. The safest hiding places are always evolving. A slim novella can be slipped under the lining of a trunk or inside a mended pillowcase. The most popular serial magazines are often stashed in the toe of winter boots during the summer, or hidden in the pocket of a coat hanging innocently in the hall closet. Seasoned contraband keepers have been known to hollow out old almanacs, using them as Trojan horses to smuggle in glossy magazines with headlines like "Passion in Paris" or "10 New Ways to Arrange Your Hair." Reading, of course, is a nighttime operation. You wait until the house has quieted, the gaslights have sputtered out, and Mrs. Featherstone has retired to her lair. Then, under the dubious cover of your blanket and by the light of a borrowed candle stub, you finally read. You devour tales of distant adventures, forbidden romances, city life, and fashions that would cause apoplexy in the parlour. The thrill of reading is matched only by the thrill of not being caught. Every creak of the floor, every turn of a doorknob sets your heart racing. The price of discovery is steep. If Mrs. Featherstone finds your magazine or catches a glimpse of a shocking illustration, it's an immediate summons to the parlour. There, you'll endure a scolding that blends disappointment, outrage, and a lecture on the steady moral decline of modern womanhood. If you're lucky, the offending material is simply confiscated, tucked away in the forbidden drawer of her desk, never to be seen again. If you're unlucky, you'll be made an example of, a story retold in cautionary tones whenever a new boarder arrives, lest the same fate befall another. Yet the drive to read, to imagine, to escape is stronger than fear. For many, these secret stories offer a breath of freedom, a way to travel the world, fall in love, or simply laugh at a joke too grown up for the official house library. Sometimes, late at night, a book is quietly slid beneath your door, a silent act of solidarity from one rule breaker to another. Over time, contraband creates its own economy of trust and barter. You might trade a French cereal for a scandalous magazine of beauty tips, or swap a love story for 3 squares of chocolate. In the boarding house, knowledge and laughter are precious currencies, hoarded, shared, and sometimes risked for a fleeting taste of rebellion. So you hide your treasures, read in secret, and savour every page. Because in a world of rules and respectability, a banned book is not just entertainment, it's defiance, hope, and the sweetest kind of escape. The holidays arrive with forced cheer, lopsided decorations, and the annual Secret Santa gift exchange, which inevitably reveals who's hoarding sugar and who forgot to buy anything. Festivities include off-key carols and the traditional argument about who gets to sit nearest the radiator. Christmas in the boarding house is a peculiar blend of warmth and warfare, a tug-of-war between genuine festivity and the forced gaiety of a roomful of women who share more dust than DNA. The season begins with the unveiling of the house's beloved, if threadbare, box of decorations. Limp paper chains, glass baubles missing their hooks, and one bedraggled sprig of artificial holly that's been passed around longer than Mrs. Featherstone's glare. Tinsel appears in unexpected places across picture frames draped over the banister, and once to general scandal wound through Harold the Mouse's cage. The mood in the house shifts ever so slightly. Boarders begin to hum, "God rest ye merry," gentlemen under their breath. A handful of brave souls attempt to bake gingerbread in the kitchen, only to discover that molasses is missing again, and someone has used the last of the cinnamon for an experiment involving hair and high hopes. The scent of burnt cookies wafts through the halls, mingling with the sharper tang of anticipation and the faint aroma of last week's cabbage. But no holiday tradition is as fraught with suspense as the Secret Santa exchange. Names are drawn from a battered hat with the solemnity of a courtroom verdict. For days the house is alive with speculation. Who has whom? Is someone plotting revenge for last year's re-gifted handkerchief? This is the moment when the true hoarders are revealed. Suddenly the boarder who's been nursing a stash of sugar cubes all autumn emerges with homemade fudge, while another, having entirely forgotten the event, hastily wraps up a bar of lemon soap and a magazine with the crossword already completed. Gift opening is a public affair. All gather in the parlour where Mrs. Featherstone presides, cup of weak tea in hand, monitoring for any signs of excess or underwhelming generosity. There are squeals of delight, polite thank yous, and inevitably a raised eyebrow or two when a particularly lavish or suspiciously regifted present changes hands. "How thoughtful," someone murmurs, turning over a knitted scarf that looks oddly familiar. The day itself is an exercise in organised chaos. The breakfast table is laid with extra care, china cups instead of the usual stoneware, slightly less burnt toast, and, if the fates allow, jam that hasn't seen better months. Carols are sung in the parlour, voices combining in off-key harmony as someone gamely tackles the high notes of "O Holy Night." No matter how many times you've heard it, Miss Plimpton's vibrato is as startling as ever. The biggest battle, of course, is over who gets to sit nearest the radiator during the festivities. Positions are staked out hours in advance with the cunning of military strategists. Woe betide anyone who nips to the washroom and returns to find her seat accidentally occupied. Harsh words are exchanged, alliances are tested, and only the strongest, or most diplomatic, emerge victorious and toasty. And yet, for all the forced fun and underlying tension, There's something sweet about Christmas in the boarding house. The laughter, genuine or not, fills the halls. Old grievances are set aside, at least for a morning, and even Mrs. Featherstone's lectures take on a softer, almost nostalgic edge. You share biscuits, swap stories of Christmases past, and for a fleeting moment, the boarding house feels less like a collection of strangers and more like the oddest, warmest family you could have wished for. When the festivities wind down and the last of the tinsel is swept away, you slip into bed, heart lighter, grateful for camaraderie, cookies, and even a slightly lopsided paper star. Because in the world of the boarding house, it's not about perfect holidays, it's about surviving together, making memories, and finding joy in the most unexpected places. And so, after a full day of dodging inspections, surviving oatmeal, guarding your biscuits like a dragon with a treasure hoard, and sprinting home before the 10 o'clock curfew like Cinderella with a timesheet, you finally collapse into your narrow boarding house bed. You made it. You woke to a bell instead of a sunrise, queued for a bathroom that offered exactly 12 minutes of chilly optimism, worked all day in a world that paid you less than your male co-workers, then returned home to rules stricter than a monastery with lace curtains. You navigated gossip that travelled faster than the electricity, ate meals that built character more than muscle, and kept your reputation polished brighter than your boots. And somehow you endured. These women did this every single day. Not for adventure, not for applause, but because independence, even the tightly supervised 10 o'clock curfew version of it, was worth the cost. Boarding houses were strict, nosy, uncomfortable little pressure cookers of propriety, but they were also stepping stones. Places where teachers, typists, factory workers and dreamers built futures one modest paycheck at a time. They followed rules about ankle exposure and gentleman callers, not because they lacked courage, but because the world demanded proof, constant, exhausting proof that they were respectable, responsible, and above suspicion. And they still laughed. They still whispered after lights out. They still fell in love carefully. They still saved coins in hidden envelopes. They still imagined something bigger. So tonight, as you stretch out in your private room with your private bathroom, with unlimited hot water, and absolutely no one inspecting your soap supply, maybe offer a small grateful nod to the working women of 1912, to the ones who lived under curfews, who ironed their collars by gaslight, who guarded their reputations like national treasures, who built independence in stiff boots and tighter rules. History isn't just made by kings and generals. Sometimes it's made by a woman quietly turning her key in a boarding house door at 9:58 p.m, determined to make it on her own. So tuck yourself in, enjoy your thermostat, appreciate your unlocked snack cabinet, because the past may be restrictive, exhausting, and occasionally oatmeal-based, but it's also proof of how far we've come. Sleep well, and be grateful you don't have to ask permission to breathe after 10 o'clock.